Disguise from a body, big box Kamalangu. Hey, funny. Well, I am Zunga to the bag. Oh, Zunga to the egg. Well, I am Zumba to the cake. Can you play it now? Shake, 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 shake. Make it dangle. Ilang-alang, now shake, 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 shake. Dangalisha, ilang-alang, Petit Baggy, La Kulisa, Petit Josie, Yakutisa, Honey Hijack, Kidnap, Tree, Kadikani Yasuzisa, Habandwana, Bandatile Boyika, Umaven, Yizani Nicorita, Tubo Book, Tubo Chidwa, it's to the songs and the Lanela go tweet. Ewe, different copy share, Jamu clever, different copy share. One side of soul in the Boleka Imali on the Patalanga story. Gonna leave me. Kalam Loro. Dina Chinti. Dina Mato. And Satigi. You tell it all. Namukini. The king on so. Follow Yam Zunga to the bag. Oh, Zunga to the egg. Follow Yam Zumba to the cake. Can you play it now? Shake, 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 shake. Make it dangle. Ilang-alang, now shake, 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 shake. Dangalisha, ilang-alang. Wait. Let me talk to these rappers for a second. Sumab. Chana jaga kulun baga shushu kaga shushu galan zabalaza dudu faga nyuku taka nyuku naga luku jala shushu chambalaga shaka zulu tandu taka dago shuku masu buzu banu baga jujung banu tata wakam taka dudu waka dudu papa spaga papu kinda cool. Two hand, as a bluff. Give it dile, kama utu, kupatie, lidi koko, kaya nyuku, baby record fundos, kiyete, bududu, umucho drang wasa sebele sumyudo, kari biri, well, let me reread, follow yam zunga to the bag, oh zunga to the egg, follow yam zumba to the cake, can you play it now? Shake, 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 make it dangle, ilang-alang, now shake, 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 dangalisha, ilang-alang, Anka Toli check, Anka Poli tank, Anka Toli, Anka's bonus quick, Sony Makayenze, Asamboni, Ansab Tolu check, sick, of course, now we cut to bullet too, Chini Nazi shot, so salong in a bullet too, aye, cut to bullet too, I'm rapaka bullet too, baby candy woman too, aye, that's all I cut to bullet too, oh, yam zunga to the bag, oh, zunga to the egg, oh, yam zumba to the cake, can you play it now? Shake, 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 make it dangle, ilang-alang, now shake, 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 dangalisha, ilang-alang, hey man.
So hello, happy 2022, everybody. Hi. Thought we'd start off with something a little bit energizing. Someone from your hood, Pete, from just down the road, Rebecca.
Recognize the ET plates.
Yes, exactly. Singing about shaking it up for the new year. So, yeah, how are you all doing?
Good.
You made it through.
Barely.
Barely. Barely, was that you, Joe?
Yeah, no, I'm good. It's an interesting start to the year, but isn't it always?
It is always. But this time I think it's particularly crazy. Welcome, Miriam. Thanks for calling in. All those people from the States are coming in really, really early. Jennifer, hello. Haven't seen you. Well, I saw Miriam. I saw you at Jen, but I haven't seen you, Jennifer, for a
I was on vacation and couldn't come to Jen, but it's 6:05 a.m. So good morning. Good morning with coffee.
Thank you for being here. And you, Miriam, what time is it for you?
7:05.
That's a bit easier. And Todd, you what, 8 or something?
It's just 9 here. So I've been up for about 5 minutes.
Okay. Well,
Yes, I'm
we'll
making my coffee.
we'll try not expect too much from the Americans for about an hour till they've fully woken up. Hi, Lali from Centurion. So she's
Hello, everyone.
Hi. Hello, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So today we were going to look at training, coaching, learning and development trends that are coming up. And it's actually a really exciting time and quite a scary time to be alive. But before I share the research, I thought what we could do was just pop everyone off into very quick breakout groups for 5 minutes just to say hi. And maybe if you want to talk about what you've noticed already this year in terms of learning and development trends. We've got quite a good range of people here, known from Asia, so many US, South African, yeah. So introduce yourself and then what you've noticed in terms of trends. And I'm gonna put you in breakout rooms of, oops, 10 of them. Some have only got one person in. I don't think that's gonna work out well. I wonder when I'm gonna wake up this year. Okay, so see you in 10 minutes at 16:20 or 6:20 or 7:20 or 9:20. See you in a mo. Bye. Okay, Janine, I'm going to move to room 6. And Alice, oh, there we go. Hello. So some of you had very local visitations and some of you had very international visitations. What did you learn? Anything you want to say? Jennifer.
I miss having conversations about growth and development, period. That conversation. And I thank my small group. Hugh was added something that very much comforted me, that the trends are maybe not so much trends, it's just the work of development, no matter where you are in the world, is an interesting, possibly not scalable thing, and the tensions we experience in organizations to want to grow large numbers of people, and how that kind of plays out. It was a very helpful 15 minutes. Thank you, Julia, for just letting us talk.
Yeah, that's the problem with the breakaway rooms, is there's never enough time. Is there? Yeah. Hi, Kanisa.
Hallo, Mama, hoe gaan dit?
Hey there.
Anyone else want to comment on what they think?
Ja,
Kanisa,
wat,
is
ek
that
het
radio?
baie mense gehelp het. Ek het 'n totaal van 13 mense gehad wat ek wou help.
So it's Hannelie.
Ek het al goed begin koop, soos
Hannelie. Okay, good. Thank you. Duncan, now we've cleared the Afrikaans out of the... Hello, let's hear
Hi.
from you.
In our group, we spoke a little bit about the journey back to in-person is an inconsistent and messy one. And that for some organizations, people that have been called back, and then there are things that are still happening remotely, not even in a hybrid way. And what we supposed is because they haven't really figured out how to do hybrid. So for the people that are back, it feels strange that it feels almost like an inversion of why are we going back to remote for these things, yet we're here already in the office, rather than being hybrid. And the other thing that we spoke about is that there's kind of a pent up demand for learning and development because it hasn't happened in so long. And oftentimes, I'm here in the US, one of the things that's happening is there still isn't a comfort to going back. So offsites are kind of a doorway into starting to come back because people don't feel comfortable coming back to the office. But in smaller groups, they feel comfortable gathering in essentially remote locations to do key meetings.
That's interesting. A doorway to returning to work. Really interesting. Thank you. Do you want to add anything? Did I cut you short? No. Thank you. Any other comments? Findings? No? Well, maybe what'll happen, and you know what, part of this silence is this thing, you know, when you put people in breakaway groups, often they don't stick to the right conversation. And frankly, I don't care. As long as you're having a good time, that's all that really counts. And if you did have a conversation about learning and development, brilliant. You can bring it in our in the presentation where I'm going to now. So I thought I would kind of do a bit of research, and it turned out to be absolutely fascinating. Can you see that, everybody? Cool. So here's a Dropbox link, and I'll put it in the chat and you can have a look, or we can mail it out. So what's in this Dropbox link is all the reports that I used for the research. I think there's 7 of them, plus these slides. Interrupt as we go along and be very loud about it because I might miss you. So that's okay. So this is quite a dense thing I want to say. And obviously, my interests have impacted on how I've interpreted the data. But what I can see from the data is JEDI, and for those of you who don't know what JEDI is, it's justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So especially in Canada, we no longer DNI, we JEDI. And it's up to you what terms you want to use. But basically, there is such a great awakening around JEDI. And the awakening is about how we work in DNI in pairs, teams, and in cultures. And this whole business of staying global, but retaining local integrity. How do we pull together these diverse strands? There's also a huge awareness that is quite depressing to see around DNI interventions not working. Certainly in the States, the one report was from a guy, Josh Burson, who said that we've returned to kind of like pre-1970s levels of equity in the society. So things have gone backwards, not forwards. And if you want a great case study to go and kind of explore what's happening in the US in DNI, Coca-Cola is a good example where Josh Burson talks about Coke having to kind of say that despite the CEO's commitment to Jedi, real changes were not made. And there was a ginormous class action suit that left Coca-Cola in a very vulnerable position. But sort of broadly, a lot of fessing up to not really knowing what to do with D&I and not knowing how to sort this incredibly complex area out, how to manage it and how to work with it. So that's coming through in all of the literature, that all leadership and development, coaching, everything has got to have a Jedi or a D&I component. Otherwise, it is not relevant. The second area is around technology. Massive, massive increase use. So it's coming in various ways, e-learning, it's coming in virtual reality learning, and it's coming in AI-based coaching. So you can go and have a look at what's happening in AI-based coaching. It's really interesting. And I've got a slide on it later, just to give you a picture of what it's good for and what it's not good for. We thought it would take a lot longer to launch. No, it's in place. And it's in place in huge companies like PricewaterhouseCoopers, SAPS, BASR, I think it is. So they've implemented these massive AI-based coaching events, and they're really incredibly successful, particularly at behavioral change. So we have to really know what we're doing as coaches in the world, how we fit ourselves in, whether we're going to go for a kind of a behavioral focus for our work, or we're going to really focus on a much more strategic stroke existential way of coaching. How are you guys feeling about that news? Soon you'll be replaced by computers. Any comments? No? You just look in the chat, yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Andrea, for sharing the chat. So
Can I say one thing on that, Julia?
yeah, please do. Yeah.
I hope those machines are later stage on the maturity scale.
We can only hope. We can only hope. But we know that AI trains on the most common data, which means it's going to be pretty average level of, hey, Praveen, pretty average levels of maturity, which is a bit of a worry. And it's probably going to be quite homogenous culturally. So, yeah, it's a tricky thing. I was having a conversation with Krista earlier today, which made me think about, you know, the Sorcerer's Apprentice, that story where it's almost like the computers are becoming our apprentices, and then they're going to like run wild and get back at us. But of course, this is just Luddite paranoia and may not be true.
Yeah. Can I chip in?
Yeah, please.
So one of the reasons why I transitioned into coaching was that World Economic Forum Future Jobs report that came out some years ago, and they're already predicting that the future is in jobs that, or one of the jobs that are jobs of the future, jobs that require like, you know, human emotional support. So like your therapists, your coaches, because you can't automate that. So like your accountants, like where I was, there will be less of those jobs needed, even like your, maybe your financial analyst as well. But AI is also big. So I guess maybe we'll have to share the pie with the robots, but some jobs will definitely become redundant.
Yeah, it looks like we will be sharing the pie with the robots, Alistair. I love that phrase. And I think it's all about, you know, how we position our coaching. Do we see ourselves as doing like behavioral shifts? Because that's actually what it turns out the AI coaching is good at. Or do we help people deal with more sticky kind of human existential issues strategic issues, things that computers have a little bit more difficulty in kind of grappling with. I think it's quite important for us to really think about how we position ourselves as coaches.
Julia, on sharing the pie,
yes.
in other fields where it's been easier for AI to get traction earlier,
yeah,
the trend seems to be that at least at this point, that AI is helping people to scale what they're able to do rather than taking over entirely. So dramatically improving efficiency and reach and scale. You know, all the way from working on a factory floor to whatever else, to coaching. So I suspect as it moves into coaching, there will be a lot of that as well, where a coach previously could barely make a dent in, you know, a company with 300,000 employees. It may now be become possible for a coach to meaningfully have an effect on that company. So I think in that way it might be useful.
Rikus, thank you. You're absolutely right, and I think my cynicism is undeserved by the machines. It increases the pie, and I was just linking it to the point I've got number 4 there, where actually it increases the pie. And enables all sorts of things. And I think I'm going to skip point 3 and come back and just go to that, just to elaborate on that. I think you're right, Rikus. I think I was unnecessarily cynical and stupid. For want of a better.
Julia, I think you must protect your cynicism maybe for a bit longer.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean,
go so quickly.
Don't give in so quickly.
Yeah, I won't let go of that cynicism entirely. I mean, give it enough time, and possibly, but in the near future, I don't think it's all over for humans.
Yeah, I don't think it's all over for humans, but I think there's this sort of tricky knife edge thing. I know there was a conversation in Jen. I don't know if Miriam, were you there? The AI conversation? No.
I must have missed it. Sorry.
Yeah, it's about, you know, how it was like, if you can get thousands more people to receive support, and maybe that support's a little bit conventional and a little bit white and a little bit corporate America, because that's who's going to be developing these tools.
Right.
Maybe that's okay. Maybe the gains are more than the losses. And, you know, this is the kind of debate that's going on. Miriam?
I know that I do some work in where I am in Montana, and they're really excited about having training and development. There are companies that just are not valuing it, and if they want to get AI and give their employees a little bit of a flavor to do any upgrade in thinking, I say go for it. I don't think that I would lose income as a result of it, and if we can train more people, wider people, it's like there are certain companies like Amazon, they train X level and they don't go any further. So if for that further level, they could start with AI, that would be a miracle. Because I think everyone would benefit from some level of awareness.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think that senior executives will do AI, maybe basic things, but.
Yeah. That would be great. And there is a trend, that no longer companies are saying we train to X level. People are doing everyone. So that is a trend as well. And it's just how do they cost that? My sort of concern is around AI not holding enough diversity, because it gets trained on one particular culture and then you make everyone in the shape of that culture. And, you know, that doesn't have to be. It's just that there's not as much data to train on for the different cultures. And also, you know, if we had enough money to build an AI kind of African coaching tool, then African culture would be kind of embedded in it. And then maybe America would say, we don't want to become Africans. Anyway, these are the interesting kind of debates that need to be had, and we need to become affair with them, and we need to figure out where we're going to land. I don't know if the answers are easy. Thanks, Duncan, for that. Do you want to add that in? Oh, the learning officer. Yeah, I like that, Chief. That's one of the documents in the Dropbox link. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Julia, if I may pipe up again on bias, because I think that's a very significant point. That's again, everywhere where AI is being introduced, that's a very real concern. I think the part that's sometimes forgotten there is that humans are also biased. And the awareness of bias with AI is enormous under people that are working with it. If you're in any AI training environment, it's a primary part of what's being discussed at any given time. So that awareness is there, I think, to a much larger extent than in many other communities. So given that awareness, the possibility of making AI less biased, I think it's easier, simpler to make AI less biased than it is to do it with people. Because ultimately it's entirely in our hands to, you know, the ability to shape that is there to a greater extent. So in the short term, and as a first experiment and being implemented in any field for the first time, bias is definitely going to be a problem. But it'll be tracked and it'll be fixed quicker, I think, than we'll find with people.
Yeah, and I mean, part of the Gen discussion was maybe it'll just land up being like those sort of Enneagram assessments. We know there's like 5 or 6. Each one's got a particular bias. If you know what the bias is, then you can make better choices around what you expose your people to, perhaps. Miriam.
And AI can also detect bias.
Okay, so and I need you in a discussion group somewhere else, Rikus, for this. Sorry, Miriam.
That's okay. It depends. So if AI has its bias, each one has its own bias, and the leader knows what it is, how can the leader bring that into discussion to presence it more, so that, or make a shift or something, so that that bias is known? If that,
yeah, maybe that's the way, acknowledging.
Acknowledging it. Also, like in the US, what I'm noticing is like training and development. Some people are in their offices, and it depends on which state they're in or which community. It's more political. If you're this, then your offices are open and you're open to X, Y, Z. And if you're in New York City, your offices are, a lot of the offices are closed because it's politically devastating if you open it up. So, and then you work on that training and development.
Sure. Yeah. It's quite a complex thing, hey? There's absolutely no one rule. Yeah. Thank you for that. So I'm just going to push on if I can and shout if I've missed someone. I can't see all faces on the screen together. So I've got some slides coming up later which talk about costs of coaching going up and down. So we're having like this sort of AI informed, much more democratized coaching, much cheaper. And then at the top end, what we are seeing is quite radical hikes in rates. So hold on for that, as they say, it's coming up. And back to point 3. So this is a significant issue for learning and development communities, is the loss of community. So for L&D, what we're seeing, or what's been written about a lot, is that all kinds of interventions must have a community building element to try and build the social cohesion back into organizations that has been lost through COVID, but not just through COVID, but a lot of them through the restructuring that happened as a result of COVID. Restructuring, transformation, people moved around, people put in teams they've never met people face to face. So all of this community building needs to kind of be embedded into all L&D interventions. Yeah, hybrid everything. Everything is hybrid, everything is patched together as best it can. Things roll, stuff moves. Sometimes we meet up, sometimes we don't. Asynchronous, synchronous, group one-on-one. Yeah, I think that's kind of how it's going to roll for a long time. And within this trend of hybridization is personalization. So because there's some people predicting that we're really going to struggle to have skilled staff in the future, we're going to have to start personalizing L&D so that it's used as a kind of retention factor. So you'd have a system where L&D would be a process, not an event, and people would kind of choose off a menu that would render whatever. Yeah. Maybe I'll talk a little bit more about it later, but just to kind of also put something in here, is that there seems to be a massive hike. Okay, let's first do Hugh before I move on. Hugh.
Julia, just on that last comment, so one of the other things that I've seen in organizations that I've had exposure to is that there's an awareness that role fits are not actually great for many individuals. So people have gone through progressions and been placed in roles, but I think the pandemic made it clear that a lot of people are not kind of where they ought to be. And so some of the great resignation dynamic has been people kind of waking up. So there's also this tension around the whole self of individuals in the work context and allowing space for some role fluidity or role agility that whole self can work in an organizational context. It's hard to express it, but it's almost like saying, yes, personalization, but part of personalization is, you know, if individuals are leaving massive pieces of themselves behind when they come to work, or they're just actually in very poor role fits, I think a lot of the cost inflationary structures in business are actually trying to resolve that as a problem, but it's one that doesn't get a lot of airtime and is not particularly well understood.
Yeah, you know, I think that is a great comment, Hugh. One of the, you know, you can have a role on paper and then you can have what a person does with it, and they're often two very different things. And I think we haven't really acknowledged the difference between the two, and maybe something is going on about forcing ourselves to work with that. Yeah, and yeah, thank you for that. Anyone else want to jump in on that one? It's quite an interesting technical point, that useful. I'm just, but so we can just note it and then move on and come back as we want to. I'm just kind of going through things. Just sort of linked to that, and it comes up a bit later, is that with a hybrid thing, you know, you have these leadership development programs that at the moment are mixed kind of interventions, and previously coaching has been typically a smaller part of them because it's much more expensive. So you have like group work, one-on-one, blah, blah, blah. So what the research shows, with as people fragment and they're in different locations and you can't get them together and there's time zone problems, there's going to be more and more coaching involved in leadership development programs, possibly even, you know, coaching might even eat leadership development for breakfast. So, you know, leadership development programs might fragment. Coaching might become more significant in that world. And for me, that's problematic because, you know, as a therapist and a coach, I know that our primary way of healing and growing is through relationship. So I just think that's something to kind of watch out for, is as, you know, when we get a team and we have the opportunity to work group one-on-one, we mustn't lose group just because it's inconvenient, blah, blah, blah. Just, there was some people writing about, you know, the growth in coaching is just so ginormous that it really looks like it has the possibility of eating leadership development for breakfast. Christo, something's going on for you. Did you want to comment?
No, I didn't, but you know, that's an old bugbear of mine. Is the issue of individual work versus collective work.
Mm.
I think if collective work is lost, it's in line with what's happening with everything. Is the more and more focus on individualization of every single issue in the organization, and and then the idea that you can resolve it through focusing exclusively on the individual.
Mm.
And I think it's risky.
Mm.
I think it's risky. I think it's very risky.
Yeah, I mean, that Wilson wrote about blame and the neoliberal system. And so under neoliberal capitalism, individuals get blamed for system problems. Yeah. And this kind of leadership development treads on similar grounds.
Yeah, it becomes a responsibility of one person to be fixed.
Yeah.
Somehow. You know, wellness for me, that's where wellness is at the moment. It seems to me. It is, well, you must take care of yourself. You must get your team to take care of themselves. And meanwhile, we will ignore the fact that the working hours culture at this organization is like this, because the targets of this culture is like this, because et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like a strange kind of an avoidance, this thing of the individualization of everything. But this is what I see. I mean, when you speak about mass coaching through AI, for me, that's another form of individualization. It's the same as the employee experience stuff, you know, where you individualize the employee experience through all sorts of technology. You turn them into consumers of coaching, consumers of solutions, consumer of fixes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's risky. And I'd like to take up the sword against it, or the bomb, yes. Whatever it is.
Yes.
Cassandra.
Yes. Alicia, continue. I saw a lot of people nod. Anybody else want to comment on that? Lali, I saw you.
Side, I think, you know, Krista said it all. I wanted to say, preach, brother, preach. But just in terms of your earlier comment, I find it interesting how coaching is always spoken about almost outside of leadership development, like it's its own thing. And it's a part of leadership development. It's just, you know, a modality that we can use. So I always find that interesting, and I hear the trend, but I don't think you could ever really just have standalone coaching as like the way to go. So, and I do think that the way we frame things also, you know, kind of plays into it. So that's my comment there.
Thank you. That's encouraging. Lolly, you'll have to stand at the barricades with us to make sure that group work continues. Yeah. Any other comment? No? Okay, cool. And the last point is really about, I read something and I don't know what I think about it, but they were saying that with this, you know, it's like everywhere suddenly work has started and there's huge demand. And I think you might have experienced it in your businesses and your practices, this kind of kick off going again. And with this kickoff, there was a suggestion that the skilled people shortage is going to become even more severe. And this is going to be a real problem for organizations. So everything has to play a role in retention. You know, especially around L&D. I don't know if anybody's experienced this or seen it. But yeah, retention, staff retention, staff retention. What comes out of the research is that people are becoming more autonomous, more mobile. They've been at home. Their major community isn't work-based anymore. It's home-based. And work plays a different kind of a role. And it's easier to move. And the choices of employers are global. So there's a lot more mobility in the workforce, and L&D needs to be used as a strategy to support people to stay. Yeah. So I thought I'd go on to this. And these are trends from the Chief Learning Officer that was suggested by Duncan as a good place to go. And it's a lovely place to go. Thanks, Lolly. Bye-bye. So the first one was people overloaded, fatigued, too busy to learn. Interpersonal connections weakening, and something about L&D professionals stretched thin and dissatisfied with virtual offerings. So I read quite a lot of stuff, but I quite liked the way this was described, because I see it like, oh, I have to go on training now. I'm working longer hours. I'm at home. I'm exhausted. I'm doing a lot of stuff together. And now I have to learn as well. So just really about how we position learning and coaching to kind of get people back into learning. The second one we've already explored. And the third one, I mean, Lolly's, I think, the only person on this group that actually has a corporate role in HR that I know of. But that L&D professionals are stretched thin and actually are not finding the e-learning and the virtual offerings satisfying. And I think that's interesting. I mean, the stretching thing, yes, we see that all the time, but that ultimately all the virtual offerings are not really satisfying what is wanted. Well, this is the version of the Chief Learning Officer, and I think that's true. And the sort of the end of the article, this guy said, we're still learning. We don't really know how to make this thing work properly, but we must just keep experimenting. At the moment, we're producing quite wooden offerings, but this can change. I thought that was interesting. You know, have patience. We'll take some time to figure out how to teach. Maybe that's true. I know it took me 10 years to learn how to teach the Enneagram, and 15 years how to teach the maturity work, and I still struggle. I think there's something about learning how to teach on virtually, or even virtually. And then once again, this big thing about all the Jedi initiatives just really not working. That's worthwhile going and reading, actually. And in particular, looking at the business case, offered in the Josh Burson article, which is in the Dropbox. And so he's got first, I think, 200 surveys that show D&I increases performance. And then McKinsey did a study which showed that a diverse team performs 25% better than a homogeneous team. So some of the data is coming through that we can really use. And I think we should be putting this in all of our work. I think that coaching for a long time thought itself above this, but I really have to say it needs to go in. And I was chatting to someone in the States the other day, and they were saying they've got an equality coach. So I said, oh, what's an equality coach? And an equality coach is somebody who helps you work through your racial issues so that you can see the world in a more equal way. And I thought, yay, nice. It's coming in these sort of specialist formats. And then we do our coaching, racial hotspots coaching, which is how to, we're sort of reviewing a person's life and seeing where, maybe their early experience was too homogenous, or their ideas about poverty, or whatever. And figuring out where their race or gender hotspots might be. That's very useful work, and we all should be in there doing this work, because maybe the reason why these bigger initiatives that were group-based haven't worked is because they weren't backed by one-on-one work. And you've got to change the inner world to change the inner world. I don't know. Any comments?
Julia, sorry, Miriam, I see you. That you just touched on that. Did they give any other reasons for why it's going backwards for the past 50?
Plenty. Yeah, plenty. There's quite a lot written about it. But it was really the introductory section, and I can reach over here and grab it. But it looks like that. Oh, you can't see
the Dropbox. It's in the Dropbox for sure.
It's in the Dropbox. So it just gives a lot of statistics rather than explains it. Like, hate crimes are at the highest level in a decade. Despite the business case being around for getting D&I going, people are not doing it. I suspect it's a kind of a maturity thing because, as people mature, their approach changes. But I can't offer a proper explanation. There's this book by a guy called Robert Putnam, which is called The Upswing. And he says that by almost every measure, income, wealth, home ownership, education, and outlook for the future, Black and minority Americans are at their lowest level of equity since the 1970s. He says we're in a gilded age, one in which wealthy and powerful people have more power than ever. He says, driven by the decline in labor unions, increased focus on digital jobs, and automation, income has become even more unequal. Just a thought.
Julia, I'm starting to do a project, a team coaching project for people, a group that works for a food bank in Montana. And one of the things that the leader said to me is, we discussed Jedi, and she said, I don't want to get into that subject until you work with each one of my people individually, because they're not comfortable speaking out loud.
Yeah.
So they need support before they open up their mouth.
Yeah.
To work with the group. And I was like, and I've heard that from a couple of other clients. So I think people just, in terms of group work like that, are not comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And lack trust in themselves and the team, that if they say something that would be considered inappropriate, they would be ostracized, but yet they're being asked to talk about it. So there's this lack of trust.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. That person had good insight. You know, I think we have to get it into coaching and one-on-one work. Exactly as you say, Miriam. And I think that's the funny thing. Like, you meet a lot of coaches, and you look at coaches, and I don't know if I just hang with so many white people, but there just seem to be so many white coaches, and black ones too. But a lot of the white coaches see themselves as exempt from prejudice and haven't done the work. I'm not saying I have. I'm still fraught. But I just think it's something we have to, like, we've got to shake the tree. That's a tree we got to shake. Jennifer.
There's a school in Asia. It's an international school. So my work is with K-12 education internationally. And exactly what Miriam just said was, they want to, rightly so, absolutely need to have a conversation about Jedi work with their students and in the school or whatever. And somebody said, but we don't talk about anything. We're not good as groups. There's no, as Hugh had mentioned in my small group, there's no fertile soil in which to develop a self, to develop the group, especially about that topic. So can you come and just talk about that first? And it's an interesting sort of like, there's a chronology to that, but they just stopped and said, we've never had these conversations about having conversations. And now you want us to talk about something that's very challenging to many of us. And so that's exactly what Miriam mentioned.
Yeah, yeah. So I think what that means is we're going to have to spend a lot more time in this community environment, talking about how we as coaches work with it. And building some methodologies around this, and trying to clean out our own home. And Hugh, I get your point. Like, what is realistic? You know, we can't really be totally clean, because then you'll be reducing everyone to an individual. You know, group is a way of, it's a complex thing. Anyway, I think it's a huge discussion, and I'm going to make proper time on this group for that. And I'm sorry to close this off. Can I close it off and move us on? Because it's like, it's a Pandora's box, and we know we've got to do the work, and we're going to do it. But there's a couple of other things that I want to talk about as well. You cool? Okay. So, I've got quite a lot of slides. And I'm, you know, as we have a conversation all over, I'm just going to pick up certain points from certain slides that I think are going to be useful in terms of trends. So the next slide, a lot of this we've discussed, but I just want to point out something else, and that is that, so we've spoken a little bit about E and AI and all of that, and we've actually spoken through most of those things, the collaborative thing, the employee retention. That last point, this is from a training, a group perspective. That's why it's specifically in this slide. there seems to be a lot more focus on life skills. And maybe it's to do with the fact that training is going to a broader population. And instead of leadership skills, we're using life skills. I don't know what that's about, but what we are seeing is more integration of soft skills. And there's a new term for soft skills, power skills. It's called power skills. Use or lose. It's, I don't know, I think it's quite sweet in a way. So the integration more fully of power skills with technical skills in training, integration, not like, let's do now like a soft or power skill type course and then we'll do the IT, but coming together of the two worlds. And then the last thing, which I thought was actually very interesting, was a growth in credentialing and accreditation requirements. So this is quite interesting. So clearly there's a lot of coaches out there and people are having difficulty choosing which coach to go to. So credentials and accreditations are a way of making that decision. And there's, you know, IFC's basically cornered them, ICF, sorry. Yeah, basically cornered the market. And that brings in a very specific way of engaging with coaching. But you can work around it, whoever you are. But it's just interesting that like a lot of coaches have been doing little courses for years and years and years and years. You know, like that's actually often the pattern of development for coaches. Little courses, I'll do Byron Katie, and then I'll do blah, 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 blah. But actually, we're going to have to start getting our credentials sorted out and right as the world becomes more and more complicated. I think part of that is that there's been more and more coaches working on their own, and we see a lot of them. And they need to validate who they are. And also, they need to belong to a community. And the worst thing with working on your own as a coach is you don't get enough growth and development and community and global exposure. And I think that's one of the reasons why we set up this group. But it's just an interesting thing to kind of bear in mind for you as a coach. You got to keep getting accredited. You need to belong to a community to help you grow and learn. And, you know, if you were going to take my advice, I'd say choose a nice post-con community that's going to push you and make and challenge you. Choose someone global because it's going to get global. You know, the world is very global. And when we look at coaching across continents, we can see why this coaching thing is so global. Any comments? Yeah, Hugh, that is it. Yeah, I mean, you know, I say that they're a pain. So we do ICF stuff. We have been working towards getting accredited, and we have been really busy, and that's been a problem. But we're noticing our peers have got stuff together and have managed to produce the pile of paper. And that's interesting. And then we hear kind of gossip from the inside that, yes, it's getting incredibly technical. Yeah. Hugh, won't you say more about that, actually? I'm not sure I understood it. Yeah.
I was struggling to articulate it myself. I found it interesting. There's almost like this fiduciary thing that I can't help you in your development if I can't evidence my own developmental journey. So this thing around who I am as a coach, for me, is almost becoming far more important than what skills I have, because there's an integrity of my journey and my willingness to go to the edge that I need to be able to demonstrate to you. So approaches to credentialing that focus, you know, what's your signature approach, what's your journey, how have you kind of done this, seem to me more intuitive. I mean, I'm ignoring the whole trend in itself, but I find in my own personal view, the ICF approaches are probably 5 to 10 years behind where coaching has actually gone. I mean, even ICF's response to group and systemic coaching is, I mean, it's so slow, and you've got this bureaucracy that sits there. So it's, as always, you have, the need is real, the need to create credibility, the need to, create some kind of barriers to entry and standardization and all those things. But then the bureaucracy that comes systemically with that, and the inertia and sludge that, and power and hierarchies that sit there, which ironically is one of the core things that should never be there in coaching relationships. So I think there are a few things that sit underneath it for me, but I find it fascinating there's a need for competition of, let's call it regulators in inverted commas. It's to me, ICF has too much power, so I like the fact that some of the others do it. I think the thing that worries me about the ECMCC thing is it's got that cachet of being too Western, too Euro, too white-centric. So it's interesting power dynamics in the broader system.
Yeah. I've got a coach that's completely unqualified other than being like a spiritual guru. And he charges me a good rate, and it's a whole different deal. But I think that often, like, more conventional people would want the ICF thing, and there might be something in that like, it's the crazy post-cons, Hugh, like you and me, and all of you, that want somebody who can reveal a different world. I don't know. But I do agree with you about ICF, and yeah. Thank you. Okay, I'm jumping you all over if you're all right with that. Unless there's anything burning. I'm not gonna, okay, so this is quite interesting. It's from, but I think we've discussed it. It's really, go and read the paper and see where the AI-based coaching is working better or not. I don't want to open that conversation again, but basically it's a different system that is in place. It's just that you as a coach must make sure that you position yourself appropriately. It's worthwhile reading that article. And this is fascinating. So this is really interesting. When we're talking about pricing coaches, so, there's such a huge variable around pricing coaches. So I thought, let me see what's happening in the UK, because this is like really interesting. So you can see coaches start at about £500 an hour, and they go up to $12.50 an hour. So in South African terms, that is a lot of money. I see Christo's eyebrows went up. Sorry, I'm being childish. But, the prices for coaching have really increased. And this is incredibly interesting. What the article also says is that, the group one, fine, go for group one or group two, but there's not really much more value you get for coaches at, higher prices. What this might mean, and I'm kind of playing with the idea, is that coaches in emerging countries with weak currencies, we have a huge opportunity globally to coach into the world. And at these prices, from what I know about American coaches, they also do. I don't know. Let's talk about pricing coaching, and just like, what do you see, and what does this mean to you? What do you think of those prices in the UK? Todd, you want to say something?
I'm just looking up the conversion rate.
Okay. So like £1,000 would be, thank you for clarifying. I should have got that. £1,000 for us is about 22,000 Rand an hour. Yeah, it's a lot, Jennifer. And £1,000 in dollars would be, I don't know, 1,300. I don't want to go. Has anybody done the calc?
Yeah, that looks right. What £1 is 1.35 US dollars.
So 1,300. And how does that compare in your market? I mean, are you guys getting that rate? Miriam. Yeah.
I'm all over the place. It depends on the organization and the individuals. I mean, I do a little bit of pro bono, and I also do, if it's a corporate client, I charge very different than an individual, and then an individual based on what they can afford.
Mm.
And when I work with people that are looking at new careers, they pay me sometimes after the coaching.
Mm.
So I want to say that I go from 100 session to 556 a session.
Mm.
And it really depends on what the group can afford.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's how I do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I recently had someone send me $2,000 that I worked with 2.5 years ago on January 1st. And I'm like, what happened? And she just said, I just wanted to thank you for the works. And I don't know if I'm unusual in how I do it, but I do it so that I can get more people coached.
Mm. That's beautiful, Miriam. I think I want to be your coaching client. I love your attitude. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that variability thing, I think a lot of coaches have that, but it always depends on where people are in their lives and what they're up to. And if they, like if you're studying as well and you need time off, then you have to charge more so that you can enable other things. It's quite a complex process. I was just interested in the rates in the UK. I was thinking, sure, I mean, how do people think around that? Is that based on education? What is it? It's really interesting. Obviously, those are corporate prices. Anybody want to make any comment, or is it just me that thinks the money's really interesting?
I have one thought. A while back, I read about like mindset around pricing, and it was helpful for me to get away from how much am I charging for my time and really try to think of it as how much am I charging for their results. Mm-hmm. And so to really bring a conversation to less about my time and more, what are they hoping for in this process and how can we quantify that and how might that relate to the coaching work and what we're working on? Because I have some clients where, if I'm charging a high rate, but we end up calculating on the back of the envelope 100x ROI, that feels really cheap to them. And that's a hell of a lot more important, is that a rate that might feel high to me feels cheap to them based on the results. So that hard work of trying to get to that has really been helpful for me so far. And I think that really gets hard to do. I'm discovering, one of my edges in that is quantifying the value of maturation work. So if we're elevating someone's maturation by a stage, how can we quantify that in terms of that ripple effect over time from that kind of developmental intervention versus some behavior change?
Very, very interesting, Todd. And then that also puts us out of the league of the AI. competing with AI. Really, really interesting. And yes, Hugh, they sometimes leave, the buggers. And thank you, Jennifer, for giving your rate. And I think it's useful. I mean, South African coaches work on a much lower rates. So, you know, some coaches, I might work in supervision for 1,000 Rand an hour, right up to, and 1,000 Rand, help me out, people, is dollars. Lordy, make it go back. Liesel, you know maths. Come on.
Alexa says it's $64.
Yeah, $50. Okay, thank you for that. $60 to and some I might do free. $60 to 450 outside the country. And I think it's a very interesting thing to be operating globally and make choices around how you bill. And I really like, Todd, I really like that idea of thinking differently around billing. And you know, it's like curious, it's like manufacturing. So all the manufacturing then moves to like Vietnam. So maybe the coaching will come to South Africa and the US. Who knows? But then once again, the game, and it's this in therapy as well, is to get the right accreditation. So for example, I can be a UK therapist based in South Africa as long as I'm registered in the UK. It's just all about figuring these things out. Okay, so let me go on. I just think it's interesting to...
Julia, can I add a comment in there?
Yeah, please do. I know you work very globally, hey, Kate?
Well, I used to. I mean, I used to when I was part of my previous sort of international network of partners, and we used to do exactly what, well, similar to your approach, Todd, which was positioning, pricing against value. So we used to have a conversation about value. What is the value of this to you? And not what is the hourly rate. And internationally, that seemed to work. You know, in the US and the UK, it worked quite well. But I found in South Africa, people didn't like it. They just wanted to box it and reference it against, but I normally pay an hourly rate of X for a coach. And they seem, and some corporates are very stuck on rates. I had somebody approach me this week and say, what is your rate for an hour? And I said, 2,500 an hour. And she said, she came back and she said, but that's by far the highest of all the coaches I've approached. And I was like, really? Anyway, but I think so I think the value conversation is so much where it needs, that's where it needs to go. But I don't know that the South African market is ready for that. And the other thing that is interesting, I noticed that when I talk about coaching versus leadership development, it's like you can charge a different rate for that. Coaching boxes you in a lower rate, I think, positioned as leadership development. And I've had CEOs say, oh, just change the invoice. Don't say coaching, put it through as leadership development, and then it goes through at a higher rate. So I think that's also interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting, Kate. I mean, I always find it amazing that you have a CEO on a huge salary, and then you look at your experience and you might, I mean, in my case, I'm older than them and I've got more qualifications in some way. I don't have the same experience, but they're getting like an hourly rate 40 times mine, and they're arguing about my measly little thing. And then I have to wait till I fit into their procurement cycle. And then they pay me like 2 months later. I mean, sorry, I'm having a little bit of a whinge there, but it's really interesting. That's the debate, is that we need to, that's what we need to be writing about and talking about, is that value conversation. And not so that they can compare us like on an hourly rate against the carpenter who fits the front desk in. Thank you, Kate. Okay. Can I move? Because there's just two more kind of debatey things I want to bring to your attention. The one is ADT trends, adult development trends. So there's still 5 assessments. We have formed a really good relationship with Heart Hill. It's based in Sweden and England. And we are really interested in how you keep integrating diversity in how you assess and work with adult development theory. So if anyone's interested in that, let me know and we can include you in the conversations. So there seems to be greater interest in adult development coming in from all over, and often I'm coming across adult development people that are kind of specialized, particularly in education or sort of corporate leadership. They only do it. And more recently, people that are working on how to build politicians, how to coach politicians and how to grow politicians. And if you're interested in that, I think we're going to have a coaching session on that. How do you work with politicians? Is it different to other kinds of leadership people? What are the issues? We've spoken a lot about AI. And yeah, that's basically covered everything else there. And then the last really interesting thing so there's a fascinating report on Asia and what's happening in Asia and how it works. And it's a McKinsey report, and there was this bit of the report, which was the story of Irene. Now I'm going to stop the video and tell you my thoughts here, just not the video, but so Irene was saying that the number of identities she has in the world has expanded. And often they operate discreetly from each other. And she's got an identity on the metaverse, and then at home, she's a traditional Malaysian woman. And even in the metaverse, she can sometimes, what's the word I'm looking for? Present different identities. Now, one of the things we looked at in the maturity framework was this idea of identity expansion. And because our maturity process, adult development theory, is based on identity expansion. And so what this report suggested to me was that there's a trend, certainly in Asia, where this comes from, of having an expanded identity, people growing new identities, often because of their behavior on the metaverse, but also because so many different identities are becoming available. So for me, that's interesting, and I just want to watch it and have a think about whether it's going to mature people, something we want to promote. Do we want people to integrate their identities? What are we doing? Just a thought. So I wanted to give that to you, because I'm sure you who have children on their phones, or even you on the phone, I mean, maybe you're one of those people whose Facebook picture was from 10 years ago. Maybe you have a different identity. And what are we going to do with these diverse identities? Are we going to coach around them? Are we going to ask people to integrate? Or are we going to identify them? You know, what are we going to do? Is the person in real life the one we're coaching, or is it the one on the metaverse? I don't know, just some craig questions around this that might be interesting to include in coaching. Like, who are you on Facebook? How do you present? Is that part of you? Is it not? Some crazy ideas.
Julia, I love that. That's so great. Yeah, it's you know, part of the coaching I talk about is who you pretend to be, right? So I mean, in order to really take on the coaching, the leadership, the development, I think it's key to look at all of your identities. I mean, I know that I had to look at mine, and I have many different identities, including now grandma, which is part of it. And that's why I'm in Montana and work it out. But many people are afraid to step into that identity or to have a public. And I think that that's what stops them from being able to be present and communicative with others.
Yeah.
So talking about that is just bringing that elephant in presence starts the coachees in looking at it. And it may take them a few sessions or even at the end of a 6-month period, but somewhere in order for them, I mean, I guess that's how I look at it. In order for them to be fully coached, they must look at all those identities.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what to really do with it, but I think there's something there that we need to pay attention to. Andrea's got some slides that she's going to present at the end. I had hoped for a little breakaway group, but you know, we've covered quite a lot. And I want to just throw something out as a parting shot, even at the risk of you thinking I'm a pornography watching pervert. So let me tell you about something that I found fascinating. Every year, Pornhub issues a report of how many people searched for what and where. And then they map this on the world. So it tells you what people are interested in. It also tells you what kind of female is the focus of the unconscious mind and where the fantasies are going. And it's, you know, it's interpreted by a psychologist who says stuff like, wow, the search for community-based entanglements has increased. Perhaps this is a function of isolation and quarantine, or romance seems to be more searched for. What does this tell us about people's unconscious minds? Interesting that we're seeing less searches around rape and violence. What does that mean? So, I mean, go and expand your mind on these interesting research. So, you know, Medium has made a really interesting commentary on it and pulled out patterns. You can also see a map of the world and the kind of searches most likely in each area. And then I think because there are more customers in the States, then it's mapped on states. In the US, you can see which ones go for penis pumps and which ones go for fat butts. Just go and open your mind and see what's going on in the world. I found it incredibly interesting. So on that note, as I leave, and you all think I'm a prevert, let's move on. Andrea, tell us.
I mean, you made it sound very exciting. It's literally just the schedule for supervisions. So I'll put that in the chat so everyone knows what's coming up. And then I'll just share a slide so you have it in front of you. Cool. Can you all see that? Yeah. So that's just what we've got coming up. And if you registered, or you would have registered for today, it's the same Zoom details each week. So you can put them in your calendar and just say to them know that you don't, once you've registered once, you should be able to come and access the event each week. And that's about it. Is there anything you wanted to add, Julia?
No, I think that's it. I think there might be a little bit of moving around. I think we should bring in D&I and adult development a little bit sooner. Also because there's been a lot of new research in this area that has, bizarrely enough, absolutely mapped directly onto our own research done in Canada by the head of D&I or JEDI at Vancouver, she's head of that for Vancouver City, I think. So maybe we do that. And then if anybody has a specific interest in adult development and working in governments, then please let me know, because we're organizing a very big Gen call around this, just to see what experience people have. And then I'll do that call, and then I'll come back to this group and report on what people are saying. And then Lucille would do the bits in between that are much more technical. Andrea, we gave you 10 minutes.
I mean, I can also say that our AIM accreditation dates have been confirmed for the year. If you're on our mailing list, you should have received those. We have our first accreditation happening at the end of this month for level 1. Yeah, so if you are interested, have a look on our website. I'll link that for you now, or pop me a mail. If you know other people who are interested, please do the same. And we're also running a new accreditation, which is level 4, and it's around building facilitation skills using the Enneagram and IMF.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. So we have got 10 minutes left. Do you want to do a quick breakaway, or do you want to go and have a gin and tonic or start your day? There's a gin and tonic, Jennifer.
Not yet. Not yet. Just more coffee.
Okay. All right. So we zoomed through quite a lot today. Maybe if you can, what I'd love to do is a checkout with the one thing that most interested you, so we know how to support this group into the year. Maybe just a pop-up. Just say one thing that most interesting for you.
I'll go first.
Yeah.
Multiple identities and coaching with that framing.
Cool, thank you.
More of the Jedi work.
The Jedi, yeah. Thank you.
Julia, I've gone blank what it's called now, but there's a Chris, to help me. There's an Enneagram. Like I know 8 is rejection. What is it?
Oh, denial triggers.
No? There's one style for every 3 types, and it's wait, I'll look at
I think you're referring to the object relations.
Object relations, yes.
Oh, object relations theory, yeah. Yeah, cool. We can definitely do something on that. Object relate, yeah, I know what you mean. We can do it from an Enneagram perspective or from the actual theorists. Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Start with the basics, because it's something I haven't encountered in my 10 years with the Enneagram. My request is start with the basics, please.
Yeah, no, it's really important because, of course, one's relationship with one's organization is predicated on one's early attachment recipes. So thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Christy.
Come along, pop up. Rikus, I'm putting you on the AI.
I wanted to say AI.
Okay, cool.
Rikus and I had a conversation in our first breakout about AI, and it's a very interesting move.
Cool.
What I'm struck by was your comments about, as operating as individual coaches. It's so easy to miss a whole bunches of things. And I think today that's just been flagged. Like it's time to look into things and be more informed about what's happening in this space. So thank you. It's a little bit, I noticed my energy was flattening, and I sort of tuned in and I thought, oh God, it just feels like there's a lot coming and a lot to dig into here. Yeah. Thanks, Julia.
Thank you, Kate.
I think for me, Julia, 2 things. It's the AI and biases for sure. And then the second one would be this multiple personalities versus expanded personalities. And especially when you're working with online personalities and in person, that's something I'm definitely gonna think on more and do some reading more on.
Thank you. Lekker.
For me, Julia, I'm interested and also was quite shocked about the coaching rates, I think, in the UK. And I'm interested to where and which platform we would take the value conversation. So where is that getting discussed? Because I just think it's something that a professional community or of practitioners should be discussing so that it's easier to implement, basically.
Yeah, thank you. Where's the trade union for us? Viva.
For me, it's the individual development versus the group learning, and how important the group is still, with the whole thinking of going on to one-on-one coaching. But that group versus individual is, it's both and can't do either or.
Thank you. Yeah. Next up. Thanks, Cherise. Alistair. And Duncan. Alistair,
you're on mute.
No, he's not on mute. There.
I've removed my earphones. Can you hear me now? Yeah. I was saying, sorry about that. I was saying what really got me, because I'm interested in challenges, is coaching political leaders. I'm just thinking one political leader, if you move him or her up a level of maturity, how much impact that will have on a country. That will be massive. And then we might be out of jobs, because that's kind of where all the problems start, at the top. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Cool. Thank you. Duncan, thank you for,
I want to build on what Cherise said. And what I'm interested in is looking more at how we can work in systems with teams, going from the individual to supporting learning and growth as work groups. I just feel that is, with commoditization, the place that we can really look to in the future. And I want to say how much I appreciated the look at what the trends are. It's, some of these things are concerning, but it's so helpful to have clarity of where things are going so that you can actually be proactive and start thinking about these things. So thank you for putting all this work together. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Duncan. Thank you for that. Thank you. Janine? Janine, you there? I think the Wi-Fi is bad in Muizenberg. Oh, she can't ask to unmute. Plan mute me. Oh, I can't you have to unmute yourself. No?
She might be calling in by phone.
No.
That might be the problem with unmuting.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll catch her on the WhatsApp. In the meantime, someone else could have a go.
I can hop in.
Yeah.
A couple quick things. One is asking the talent development leaders I'm talking to, what they think the trends are too. I'm curious how that might match up, if at all, with what we saw today.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've been asking that as much, and more asking what their needs are rather than trends. And then where maturation falls in all of this technology development and scaling work that's going on? And how could maturation coaching, like, could AI do that? That would be very interesting to think about.
Yeah, I like that way of asking. Needs rather than trends. Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else want to make a comment? Yeah, Nicola.
I so appreciated a conversation based on the research that you've done, Julia. It was like somebody had taken stones and shone them up and handed them on a plate. And it made for, yeah, really rich and diverse thinking about things. So thank you.
Pleasure. Pleasure. You know, I love a research project. All righty. Anyone else want to say anything before we close? You don't have to. Okie dokie. So the next session is in 2 weeks' time, and it's Lucille's session. And there's Kanisa in as well. They're good. Thank you, Andrea. Enneagram harmonics and Hornevians. How do I use them in coaching? It's for Enneagram people. So thank you for the incredibly rich conversation today. And I look forward to seeing you again. And thank you for coming back. All my love. See you all later.